So, they tell you in the 80s, they used to say, if you're nervous, you should imagine the crowd naked. But so that, you're not so nervous. But that's what made me a sex addict in the first place. So I was born in 1976 and raised in Port Orchard, Washington, just outside of Seattle. I have an identical twin brother, and we are the oldest of 5 kids, 4 boys, and my sister is the youngest. My parents were not raised in a Christian home, but were saved in the early 70s, so they were relatively new Christians when I was born. My dad was in the military, stationed in Southern California at the time, and came up for the birth, but had to fly back to finish his service before returning to Washington 7 months later. I bonded strongly with my mom. She was my rock, my security, and my protection. I never felt the same security with my dad. My father was passive and emotionally absent. I have wonderful memories with him, but we weren't close. Mom wore the pants in the family. We also had a close circle of friends and that were regularly in and out of our houses. And 2 of the kids that were my age were girls, so my twin brothers Stephen and I regularly played with them. We absorbed the feminine mannerisms of the women that were in our lives. I'm sure it didn't help that I wasn't close with my father. It wasn't uncommon for us to dress up as girls and play with dolls. Mom said that we were 3 or 4 years old when we regularly wanted to spend time dressing up. She believed it was normal for kids to be curious about clothes of the opposite sex, so she allowed it for a time, but she became concerned when we weren't growing out of it. Once Mom noticed that it went beyond the normal curiosity, she started to encourage other forms of play that no longer involved dressing up. So I started to wear costumes of biblical characters because that was the closest I could get away with, and secretly dressing up when Mom wasn't around. Dad had 2 half-brothers that were gay, so Mom worried about my twin brothers and my future. We didn't see them regularly or do much with them. But back in the 80s, there wasn't anyone my mom could turn to with answers with her questions about homosexuality and gender confusion. Dad later admitted he couldn't relate to the dressing up and didn't know how to connect with me. I don't remember feeling rejected or even thinking anything was wrong with me. In our family, Christianity was not just a Sunday morning exercise. My parents taught us that Jesus was real and we could have a relationship with him. I felt the Spirit tangibly during worship at church and the Christian music that we played in our house. Despite growing up in a Christian home that was relatively happy, the dark cloud of fear was always there for as long as I can remember. It slowly worked its way into my life, becoming the loudest voice and stealing my childlike contentment and joy. I have many memories where the fear felt overwhelming, so I don't know when it first took root in my heart. Mom tried her hand at homeschooling, but quickly discovered she couldn't teach 5 kids at different ages and keep the house going. We were put into public school. I was placed into 3rd grade. At first I loved it, but it didn't take long for the bullies to appear. My effeminate mannerisms and insecurities made me an easy target. It appeared most of the kids in school thought I was a girl. Many called me one, and I was taught to treat others the way I wanted to be treated. But it seemed not everyone was taught the same lesson. Other boys made it very clear that I didn't measure up, so I hung out with the girls. They were more accepting. In the 4th grade, to prove that I wasn't a girl, I took a few of the bullies to the bathroom and exposed myself in an effort to show them that I was not a girl. Nothing changed because they weren't looking for the truth. They only wanted a target. One day during recess, I sat by myself and asked God, "Why didn't you make me a girl? It would have made my life so much easier." In my childlike understanding, I couldn't understand. It would have solved all my problems. I felt as if I was sitting on a fence with one foot on the feminine side and one foot on the masculine side. I knew I wasn't a girl, but I didn't feel like a boy, and I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Stephen was being picked on as well as I was, and we would come home complaining to Mom about the teasing. She didn't know what to do other than to encourage us to forgive. She said, maybe God's allowing this because one day he's going to allow you to help other people who are also experiencing the same thing. Her words gave me some hope, but my twin brother got angry at God, believing God was doing this to us. In 1988, when I was 12 years old, our whole world changed without warning. Mom discovered Dad was cheating, and she kicked him out. What I didn't know at the time was they'd had a rocky relationship from the beginning and even separated 6 months after their wedding. For a 6-month period after their wedding. They kept their marriage problems to themselves. I don't have a single memory of them fighting or arguing. Dad and I had little to no relationship, so I wasn't devastated by his leaving like my younger siblings were. What I didn't know was I'd locked my heart behind thick walls of self-protection. I convinced myself Dad's leaving hadn't affected me. It wasn't until years later that I was shocked to discover just how drastically his leaving did actually affect me. Dad moved in with his new girlfriend, and they lived near the Seattle area, and it was quite a distance. We'd go over for weekend visits, but they were very uncomfortable. I walked on eggshells. Dad's girlfriend was hot-tempered, and it didn't take much to set her off. I quickly learned it wasn't safe to bring up anything regarding the divorce. Some weekends, Dad didn't even show up to get us. On scheduled weekends, I'd sit at the top of the hill and wait till I saw his vehicle coming. One particular weekend, I waited for hours just to discover he wasn't coming. Shortly after Dad left, I entered junior high, and if I thought that teasing was bad in elementary school, it was nothing compared to junior high. It was 3 years of hell. I was no longer being called a girl. Now I was being called a fag, a sissy, and a queer. I had to take showers after PE activities, so there was no longer any doubt about my gender. I was regularly asked if I was gay and if I was afraid of getting AIDS. Sorry, I lost my place. Not everyone asked because they were mean. Some genuinely just wanted to know. They were curious. But no one believed me when I said I wasn't gay. This was the early 1990s when being gay was the worst possible thing a person could be, unlike in today's culture where it's cool to be gay, or so it seems. The other boys made it clear I couldn't walk, talk, run, or do push-ups right. I was a failure as a man in every way. I just couldn't measure up no matter what I did. The locker room was where the worst bullying took place. It was 1990, during the 7th grade, that I started to go through puberty and my same-sex attraction started to emerge. I found myself attracted to so many of the guys in the locker room. After catching one of my brothers masturbating in the bathroom, I started to practice that. I was instantly filled with shame and remorse, but it was my new habit and I couldn't stop. Multiple times over the next 3 years in junior high, the rumor was spread about me throughout the school that I had gotten an erection in the locker room. I was shy, cowardly, and had no fight in me. Quietly enduring was my only defense. Despite all the bullying I was going through, I was never physically beat up, but there was lots of threats. Stephen and I had accepted the Lord at an early age and were baptized before my father left. I felt like I had a special connection to God. While I was pressing in, he was pulling away and becoming more and more angry. I felt God's presence, especially on those dark days in junior high. One day, standing in the PE line, waiting to head back to the showers where who knew what horrors awaited me, I can remember my heart overflowing with love for God and wishing everybody around me knew this love. There was a lot of confusion in my life, but I knew for a fact God was real. On walks home from school, my twin brother began taking out his anger on me. He belittled and criticized me, repeating all the things he'd heard about me that day from the other kids. He made it very clear I was an embarrassment. I'd always liked being a twin because it was like having a built-in best friend, and we had so much in common. But he began pulling away in elementary school. He wanted his own identity free from me. Youth with a Mission is an international missionary organization. They started a kids program called King's Kids in our area, and my mom signed my siblings and I up. We met on weekends once a month and received Bible teaching, learning skits and choreographed dances, and simple ways to share what God was doing in our lives. We'd usually do an outreach, and each weekend somewhere in the area. We performed at churches, convalescent homes, and on the streets of Seattle. There were those at church and King's Kids who also picked on me. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I felt like a misfit. On those King's Kids weekends, God gave me the verse, Philippians 1:6, which reads, "Being confident of this, that he who has begun a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ." I held on to that verse as God's promise that he would never leave me, and it became my life verse. My masturbation problem had quickly become an addiction. I made my choices on TV shows and movies based on the possibility of there being a sex scene. I was even buying cheap romance novels at thrift stores to feed my lust. One day, my mom caught me reading one and told me to throw it away because it was like pornography. But wasn't that the point? It was around the time my dad and my stepmom relocated to Colorado, where we rarely saw them, especially unless he came back for a visit. In the summer between junior high and high school, my mom married a man she'd met through our King's Kids program. My stepdad was more like my stepmom, explosive and easily set off. I was past the point of wanting a father figure, and so we clashed. Home had always been my safe place, but now that changed. I spent hours in my room, either reading or listening to music. It was my escape from all the chaos in my life. Stephen, wanting nothing to do with our stepfather, relocated to Colorado to be with my dad. By the time I made it to high school, it seemed most of the bullies either grew up or didn't care anymore and pretty much left me alone. There were still those who picked on me, but for the most part, I could walk the halls feeling free. The more I stuffed my same-sex attractions, the stronger the feelings seemed to get. It never crossed my mind that all my excessive masturbation and my sexual fantasies were feeding these desires. I didn't know what to do about it. I tried talking to my mom about the masturbation thing, but it was the most humiliating experience I ever had, and I never talked to her about anything else. In my mind, I was only gay if I was having sex with other guys, which I wasn't. I felt lost. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't see any answers on the horizon, so I continued stuffing these unwanted feelings. When I was in King's Kids, I did 2 overseas mission trips, one to Spain in 1992 during the Olympic Games, and one to the Philippines in 1993. I fell in love with the Philippines. One of my many dreams was to be a missionary, so I loved my involvement with King's Kids. After graduating high school, I moved to the Philippines and attended YWAM's discipleship training school. After graduating the school, I moved to YWAM's location on the northern coast where I had done my outreach phase of the school. One of the places we ministered was a little island just off the coast, and I felt God's call to that island. The goal was to plant a church there, which I had a hand in pioneering, and incidentally, it's still there today, 25 years later. I hit it off with the island youth and spent most of my time with them learning their language and their lifestyle. After years of bullying, it was shocking to discover that guys wanted to be my friend. It was like a whole new world had opened up to me. Despite my obvious effeminate mannerisms, these guys accepted me exactly like I was. They didn't belittle or mock me. God used those friendships to start healing wounds of rejection I carried. Many of those friendships I still have today thanks to Facebook. I spent 5 years in the Philippines silently struggling with all the half-naked guys running around and secretly wanting to have a hookup. When I visited the Philippines in 1993, I met a guy that was around my age and we kept in touch. During my school, his letters quickly became sexual. He lived several hours south of where I was living, so I didn't see him much. A couple of times we did get together and fooled around. Well, we never had sex. With each encounter, we took it a little farther, and I knew it was just a matter of time before something happened, so I ended it. One day I found a pamphlet that shared the testimonies of a man and a woman who had come out of the gay lifestyle. It talked about an ex-gay organization called Exodus International, which was an umbrella ministry for other ex-gay ministries and support groups around the world. I didn't know these ministries existed. I wrote them and they sent me their newsletter. It scared me how much I could relate to these stories. After years of running from the truth, I finally accepted my same-sex attraction. God showed me my next step was to go to one of these ex-gay live-in programs. I moved back to the States and went to New Hope Ministries just outside of San Francisco in September 2001, right before the planes hit the towers. We had classes about our sexual struggles and dealing with addiction, but it was primarily a discipleship program similar to my YWAM school. While God brought further healing to my broken life, he didn't take away my same-sex attraction. I knew at some level he loved me, but I was bound up in lies and misconceptions and had some deeply held misconceptions of God, so I ran, afraid to surrender. When I left the program, I moved north to Sacramento, where I lived for the next 4 years. Being a late bloomer, moving to a new city where I hardly knew anyone and had to fend for myself was a pretty scary experience. The transition was very difficult, and having no accountability, I quickly got myself hopelessly lost in pornography. I was going to church and even going to a local ex-gay support group, but I was too embarrassed to let anyone know what I was struggling with, especially after just leaving a program. In Sacramento, I got into selling merchandise for different singers and speakers and relocated to Nashville. I spent 15 years working in the Christian and country music business but because of my tour schedules, I rarely went to church. I ended up moving in with a local pastor who started mentoring me. I also got hooked up with Grant Pemberton and the Nashville church plant. Through these relationships, God started really working in my life. I began having a daily quiet time, and I found reading the Bible was changing me. I started the difficult task of trying to curb my porn and masturbation habit, working on looking away when I found someone attractive, and taking every thought captive. I'd fall down over and over again, and it often felt impossible to overcome. Over time, though, I started to see a decrease in my temptation. I also started to fast lunches, praying for God to change my life. I finally quit running and began pushing past my fear and started spending times in solitude with God. For so long, I expected him to drop the hammer of judgment on me for all my sin, but I found him wanting to love me. I failed to realize the hammer had already fallen on Jesus, so it wasn't going to fall on me. He showed me that I wasn't a beggar on the outskirts of his kingdom. He saved me to be his son, royalty. At the end of 2019, he gave me an urgency to write my story in a book. In mid-2020, after completing the first draft, I started working with a writing coach. Along with the Holy Spirit, she helped me to face, process, and work through my past, forgiving all who'd hurt me. God revealed the number one question I'd been asking my entire life was, do I matter? He showed me that not only did I matter, but my pain mattered to him. Over the last 5 years, God has been uprooting lies of the enemy that have taken root and grown up in my heart. He has been exposing wounds and hurts so that I can face them and he can heal them. He showed me that I'm no longer on that fence of gender confusion. I don't know when he helped me off that fence, but looking back, I can see I'm no longer there. He broke the power that my sexual addiction had over me, and I'm now 3 years porn-free. God didn't give me a lobotomy. Thank you. God didn't give me a lobotomy. I'm still same-sex attracted, and I still occasionally struggle with masturbation, but it's no longer the habitual issue it used to be. I'm learning to crucify my flesh and drag my will in line with the will of God. Some days I make right choices, and other days I fail miserably. God has been restoring my relationship to my dad, and we are now on speaking terms. In fact, a couple of years ago, I flew to Arizona to reconcile with him and my stepmom. It surprises me, no matter how much healing God has brought me through in my life, the allure of sin is still there. If I'm not daily walking in the Spirit, how easily I can fall back into old patterns. I'm so thankful for the Lord and what he's brought me through, but I know I'm just scratching the surface. I'm excited for the future and what God's going to do in my life and through my book, and I hope it will be out soon. So thank you for letting me share.